Okay, any questions? All right. As far, well, one more thing. Let me put one more thing on here. Next week's class is optional. No new material will be covered. If you have any questions or if you need, for the test or whatever, anything you're welcome to. And I'll have the Zoom meeting. I will be also here in Chicago. But so next week's class is optional. If you are here next class and you want to turn in the test, that's fine too. But no new material next week. Okay, let's jump right into it. Give me 1 second. Nope, not that. Both of them, so I know I can do it. All right, so let's jump into let's do the easy one first. Sampling practice exam. Okay, so what we're going to do with this is see if we can accept the controls. Now remember, we don't have to do the test of controls unless we're going to rely on them. And so if we are going to rely on them, though, we have to test them. So in this case, the audit plan said we're going to test the controls because we want to rely on them. So we're hoping that it comes out that we can rely on these controls. Now, if it doesn't work that way, then we have to do some more substantive testing. But anyway, the plan is that we can rely on these controls. Okay, so the allowable error rate is 5%. So we're going to see if the upper limit comes in under the 5%. And the allowance for sampling risk is 3%. Okay, what's our error rate for this sample? We had 400 purchase orders and 16 of them were approved without a manager's signature. So what is the error rate?
%?
Anyone?
It's a 4%. 16 divided by 400.
You're just sleeping already?
Would it be the 384 plus the 16
Huh?
divided by the 16? I'm sorry.
I'm sleeping already.
I didn't do the math.
Yeah. Sorry about that. Anyone?
Hello, Professor, do you hear us?
I hear you now.
Oh, okay. So I said that it's a 4% because I divided 16 divided by 400 purchase order.
Yes.
Is it correct?
Sorry, I mean, yeah, I realized what it was. No, I didn't hear you because I didn't have the screens down, so we didn't have the speakers in the room here. I'm sorry. Again, I'm the one sleeping, not you guys. Okay, so the air, so the airs were 16 divided by the sample of 400. And so, yep, the 0.04, oh, shoot, 0.04 or 4%. Okay, so this is the air rate we have. This is the observed air rate. It is 4%. Oh, don't do that. Okay, oh, there I got rid of it. Well, time to mess it up again. There, that's what I was trying to do 5 minutes ago. Okay, so the air rate is 4%. Now it could be off by even more than that. So the air rate is 4%. Now, because this is a sample, we could also have the sampling risk. The allowance for sampling risk is 3%. So plus the allowance of 3%. And this will give us an upper limit of 7%. So this is what we have to compare to our allowable. So the upper limit of this sample would be 7%. In other words, it's well, here I know. I don't even know if I have a marker. Oh, there's a marker here. All right, let's see here. So this is what this would look like. It looked like this. So we say that we observed an air rate of 4%. But because this is a sample, it's possible it could be up by a little bit more. This is the allowance. And that is 3%. So this could be the upper limit would be the total of those two. So you get the idea though. So this is 7%. So this is the upper limit. And this is what we will compare to our allowable amount. So yeah, and again, this is there because this is a sample, and we don't say what the person. These invisible markers are okay. Hey, look, a marker to the right. So this is because this is a sample. Now, if it was a two-tail, there'd be something going down here. We really don't. We're not worried about that. We're really worried about it. Is it worse? It could be better, but we're worried about it if it's worse. And so that's what this allowance is. That we are actually saying, okay, this could be up to 7% off. And if we're only allowing for 5%, let me get back into the, Okay, auditor allows for an error rate of 5%. So would we be happy here? Can we rely on the controls? The auditor will accept it if the error rate is no more than 5%. the sample there, the sample. The upper limit here is 7. So yeah, no, we cannot rely on this. No. Now, our best estimate is that it's off by 4, but this is a sample, so this allowance comes into play. And this allowance says, okay, well, this is a sample, so it could be worse. And the upper limit is 7. We can only accept it if it's 5, so we would not take it. So, the allowed amount, I wish there was better terminology for this, because allowed and allowance sound like too similar. But the allowed amount for the air rate is 5%, and that's the air rate for the sample, and the sample would include this allowance. So no, we would not rely on it. What would be the misstatement of the purchases? It's unknown because this is not it might not be F at all. Tested controls. Not indicate misstatements. So it's unknown. And by the way, it's not that in tested controls they might say is the amount correct, but that would be a yes or no. It wouldn't tell you how much. If it was off by a penny or if it was off by $1 million, you wouldn't know which. It'd just be yes or no. Okay, so this is the one that people struggle with, this next one here. So we were planning on doing substantive tests. These are the dollar tests. So these are for the dollar amounts. Oops. And they're only $1. They're only for the dollar. This is like the well, actually what we're going to do next, like this classical sampling stuff. And so we planned on hopefully we were planning on relying on the test of controls. That's why we did them. If we weren't going to rely on them, we wouldn't have done the test of controls in the first place. But we wanted to rely on them. So the question is, we have this planned substantive test of 500 items. How would it impact it? Will we take more or less or the same? Because now we find out we can't rely on the controls. So we were hoping we could rely on the controls, and then we would take a sample of 500 items. Okay, we do the test, we can't rely on the controls. So now, do we take more, less, or the same? Let's write that in.
We would take more.
Good. Yes, we'd have to take more because we can't rely on the controls, and we were planning on relying on the controls when we came up with, so for example, this might be, I'm just making this up. Maybe you take, I don't know, 800 items. Because you can't rely on the controls now, so you have to take more of the substantive tests to be just as happy. Again, you wanted to rely on the internal controls, or you wouldn't have done the test in the first place. But you can't rely on these, so you're kind of on to plan B. Plan B is, okay, we just take more items, substantive items, and do the testing. Okay, and is this test required by the CPA? CPA. Tests of controls are only required if the auditor is relying on them will reduce the substantive testing. So tested controls, they're only required if they are planning on using those tested controls, using the control, I should say, to reduce the amount of substantive testing. So if they are trying to rely on the controls, they have to do the testing. If they aren't, and they might not be, there's times when, if you only have, for instance, let's say you're doing accounts receivable or something like that. Well, there's only like 11 accounts receivable, just test all of them. Don't worry about the controls, just test all of them. So it really depends on whether you're going to rely on the controls or not. If you're not going to rely on the controls, you don't have to do them. So they're only required if they are relying on. If you're not relying on it, don't need to do them. Question on that? Okay, and again, these tested controls, these are yes/no tests. Either they have a signature or they don't. So this is, here's how this came about. These are the yeses, and and these are the nos. I was gonna say, oh, leave it like that. So this is the oops. So these are the yes, and these are the nos. And we don't look at the dollar amounts on them, whether they're misstated or not. We're simply saying, can we rely on the test, on the controls, I should say. Okay, let's go to classical sampling. And classical sampling, these are substantive testing. This is substantive testing. Sometimes called substantive procedures. So that's what classical sampling is. Substantive procedures. These are for the dollar amounts. These are to find material misstatements. Dollars. Okay. Let's do the easy part, finding the average. We took a sample of 1,000 items, and the total product value of the sample was 43,000. So we're going to divide that by 1,000. And that equals 43. Total book value was 40,000 divided by 1,000. Oops. Yeah, take one each of those. Equals 40. Okay, so I'm going to plug those in here. Okay, and at this point, you should start when you're doing these, you probably just start looking at what they're asking for, and mean per unit means mean is just average, right? Oop. So the mean per unit is the average per unit, and whose average do we take? The auditors or the one that we came up with, the auditor one, or the book one, the one the client gave us? Which one are we more persuaded by? The one we did or the one they did? The one we did. So we're gonna say, okay, every one of these accounts receivable, all 12,000, should be $43. That's what we came up with for our average. So we're gonna take the audit average, 43, times yeah, 12,000. Yeah, yeah, that's the way to say it. So we're saying every accounts receivable should be $43. Yep. So this should be, where am I? Here it is. So our projected, yep. Good. 516. That's how I know. Okay, so this is our projected value, 516,000. Oops. Lost the dollar amount. Hey. Okay. So the book value is 500,000. So they got 500,000 on their books. We're saying it should be 16,000. So what's the misstatement? Yep. So it's like 16,000. Yeah. Are their books overstated or are they understated? Yep. Understated. I'm sorry? Oh, no, I'll put it. I'll say, let me see here. We'll do the calcs here. So we'll say projected value. I can't remember how I did it on the handout. Okay, so is it book value minus projected? Okay. The book value is 500,000 minus the projected value of, so this will be our misstatement, which is negative, so negative means understated. I'm saying it's too low. So this is the misstatement. This is a under misstated. And the mean per unit, average per unit, this one is used if if the items in your sample are about the same value, it's a good one to use. Okay. Ratio says that big things are off by big amounts, small things are off by small amounts, that there's a ratio of what these are off by. And we take the audit amount. Yep. Okay, so the audit amount. That's just the audit average, book average is 40. And so we're saying, okay, there's a ratio here of what they're all off by. Oop. And we're gonna multiply this by the total book value. 500,000. Oops, that's not. 500. I'll do a nice number. I can. 535. Oop. So this will be the projected value of it. That's not how you spell value. That's how you spell. Okay, so the projected value is 535,000.
I counted it off to 1.07. If you don't round it off, it's 537.
Okay. Well, see, that's my fault. I'm an auditor. I should have checked that.
No.
See? Yeah, no, that's good. It's a good lesson to know. As an auditor, you always check what someone gives you. Okay, so this is our projected value.
Yeah.
Okay, so what is this? This is understated by 37,500. So this will be the misstatement. This will be understated by 37,500. Yeah,
Question, like it's gonna repeat that it's gonna be understated in all of them, or?
it can be. The wild card there is the mean per unit one. And the reason being is that these other ones they take into account the book value. And so sometimes it's possible. Let me think how this one would be. If these looked like this, if these were, say came out to be 38, and this one came out to be 35. This would be one where the mean per unit would be overstated and the other two would be understated. It's possible they don't match up. It has to do with if the audit average is actually less than the actual for the entire book value. Let's see, is that correct? Let me see. What's 12,000 times 38? I'm pretty sure that, yeah, that'll come out understated. The other two will be overstated. Or sketch it. It'll be overstated. The other two will be understated. So yeah, and this one, and the mean per unit one is the one that's a wacky one because it ignores the book value. So it's kind of on its own. It says, here's the number, we multiply it out. And again, this is usually only used for things that have pretty much the same value. I can't remember exactly, but I think when I was at US Steel, we have different categories of steel, but the steel would have similar values. They have, I don't want to get too far into it, but like there's prime steel and there's secondary steel. Prime steel is like used for autos. Secondary steel is used for pretty much everything else. And but the prime steel is, whatever it was, $3,000 a ton, and the secondary steel was all, 2,000 a ton or whatever it was. And I think to get an estimate, I think they just get an average of them. And I think they use a mean per unit. But again, we're talking about the weight of it times whatever the value was, and so they were all pretty much the same. Okay, difference estimation. Difference estimation is when we subtract them. Did I take book minus audit, or what how did I do?
Yeah.
Book,
Book minus.
okay. Nope. Yeah, and so this would be, and this one's a little bit different. You get the projected misstatement before you get the projected value. So this is the differences. So this is actually a understatement of $3. And so what we're going to do is say that everything is off by this $3 understatement. So it's kind of back up to this one. And say all 12,000 things are off by 12,000. 36. Yeah. So this will be a 36,000 understatement. Okay, so coming up here, what would be the projected value? Well, we're saying the 500,000 is understated by, I think of a good way to write this. Let's do it this straight. So we're saying it's 500,000 is the book value. So book value plus the understatement. I don't know how I did this. If it was an overstatement, you subtract it. I can't remember how I did it before. Yeah, so this would be the projected value. So, and now the ratio and the difference usually go in the same direction. So if this one's understated, this one's understated. If this one's overstated, this one's overstated. The mean per unit can be the wacky one. I think they're what I would call well behaved on the exam. I think I set them up so that they are usually all the same. I'm not positive on that. Any questions? That's it for that. Okay. Save that. One down, one to go. Any questions? Any question in Zoom land?
No questions, Professor.
Okay, get on with it. Okay. All right, so let's go to the property, plant, and equipment. Excuse me, inventory and property, plant, and equipment. Now, inventory and property, plant, and equipment they're similar in that go out and you count things to see if they have them or not. So inventory and equipment are very similar in that matter. Now, inventory is going to have many more items in that, but the idea is kind of the same, is that you have this inventory of stuff and you're going to see how many there are and what the value is on. Okay, two type of inventory methods. Periodic is usually taken at the end of the period. So the physical inventory is taken at the end of the period. For example, December 31st. So December 31st, we will have everybody come and we'll count all the inventory. So this will be the year-end inventory. Perpetual inventory is that when inventory is taken let me address that. The physical inventory is counted piecemeal. Is that one word? One word. I'm highlighting it. All right. So throughout the year, they'll take the inventory at different times throughout the year. So for instance, maybe if it's a grocery store, maybe they count milk on August 30th. Inventory. I might go down here. And let's say that they inventory bread on September 1st. And so on and so forth. So they take inventory on different dates. Now, when they do this, they should be doing this. They should inventory everything in the inventory should be counted at least once a year. It'll just be counted at different times. And this is a very common thing. Large companies, they can only do it this way. So for instance, if you ever go into Walmart, say at late at night, there's a Walmart by us that's open at, I think it's open until 11 or whatever. But if you go in there at late at night, or if you go into one that's open 24 hours, you go in there and, at 2 o'clock in the morning, you'll see people in there actually counting inventory. And they'll have an aisle closed off and they'll have all the stuff set up to take the inventory. And, the next night they do inventory something else and they just keep going through until they should inventory everything at least once throughout the year. But anyway, this is a very common. Now, this doesn't mean that they can't do an inventory at year end, but usually they don't. And if you think about someplace like Walmart, it's impossible for them to do an inventory at year end. They couldn't, there's not enough people in the world to count, all that stuff. Certainly no auditors to observe it and all that. So they have to do it throughout the year. And so this is a perpetual inventory system. And again, this is one of those things that usually it's larger companies a lot of times will do it. It is possible they smaller ones do it too, but anyway, those are two different types of it. And by the way, if you're an auditor and you're auditing Walmart, you might go at 2 o'clock in the morning to see them in inventory, bread on September 1st. Observe them taking inventory, see, and do all the stuff that you normally do. And, again, it's on September 1st. It's not after the year end or, December 31st, anything like that. Okay, so substantive tests of inventory. The first one is get a listing of the inventory and compare it to the ledgers. And compare to the books. In other words, compare to the ledgers. So you need a list of the inventory values and compare to ledger. And this is usually a fairly quick thing to do. This is not always, but it can be it's usually a quick thing to do. I had a weird one that just didn't match out one time, and I kind of looked into it. It wasn't off by much, but I wanted to see why it was off. And it was the weirdest thing. We had a new purchasing person who would negotiate already completed contracts. It was the weirdest thing. So he had some contracts that he negotiated that we already had paid for them, and he got the price switched on something. It was really strange. But anyway, he insisted that they go back and change the inventory amounts to reflect. It should have just came through as a credit. But anyway, it was a. I'm sorry.
They're to reduce the price or?
It was kind of weird. There was something they reduced and something increased. I have no idea how. After meeting the guy, I kind of realized that whoever he was dealing with probably just threw their hands up and said okay, because this guy was really insistent on it. And I said to him, I said, well, we shouldn't do it through the inventory. If you negotiated and we got credit back, we just put it on the books as a credit for when you negotiated it. No, that's what accounting told me to do. I was like, yeah, because that's the right thing to do. But okay, so. After about 15 minutes of talking to him, I realized, and it had nothing to do with that. But he, while we were doing the audit, he actually left and went to another job, and boy, were we happy. So anyway, okay, so evaluate the planning of physical inventory. I'm not going to go through all these. So select the best days to do it. Usually it's near year end if it's periodic. Either year end or pretty close to it. Suspend production. This one is a good one to do, and this is going through and having someone segregate the obsolete and defective inventory. So obsolete things are kind of old, things that are defective, maybe they're in reduced value, and the reason being is you don't want something that, for instance, you got a 10-piece crayon set and there's only 8 crayons in it, so they got it marked down, and you don't want them counting that as a complete crayon set because it's not, maybe that's a bad idea, a bad example. But anyway, those things that are obsolete or defective, you have them separated. This one is probably the most important. Oops. Ah. I think I'm okay. Okay, there we go. This is probably the most important one of all of them. Well, this in the last one, I should say. So establishing control over the process or the use of inventory tags or sheets. So inventory tags or sheets. I don't know if you guys have ever done inventory, but if you have, this is probably familiar to you. So control over the process over the use of inventory tags and inventory sheets. So this is what it looks like. Let's stop here. Okay, so Okay, so if they have let's say you're in a store and they have shirts. Hey, look, this one writes. Of course, now you gotta see me draw a shirt. So they have this rack of shirts, right? And these are all on this rack, and so here's and so you have these shirts, okay? So you're gonna inventory these shirts. These are shirts, by the way. I should probably write that because you can't tell from what it's there. Okay, so these are the shirts. So here's this rack of shirts. So what you're going to do is before they do the inventory, actually, you're not going to do it. The client's going to do it. They're going to have people from usually operations will do this. They'll walk around and they'll put tags on the rack. So if you have tag on the rack, there'll be some, some color or something. But anyway, they'll have this tag on the rack. People who count the inventory will come over. When they count it, they'll take this tag. It could be a sheet, it could be a tag. They'll take this tag and they will count what's on there and turn this tag in. So they would say, okay, there's 3 on here. They'll take this tag away then and, turn it in with all the stuff. So they went through, they pick up this tag or sheet. This old sheet. There's different ways of doing it, but some way they're going to take this off. Now, when someone walks by this rack, if it doesn't have a tag on it, that tells them it's already been inventoried. If it does have a tag still on it, it tells them it hasn't been inventoried. Okay, so they go by, they'll pick off these tags, they'll turn these in. Why do you do that? You do that for 2 reasons. The first reason is that, first of all, one is that everything gets counted. Close. Okay, so everything gets counted. So if there's a tag on it, you pull it off, count them, put it on. Usually they'll have what they call a SKU number. Stock, I don't know what it's called. But anyway, if you ever do inventory, we'll talk about SKU numbers. So everything gets counted. The second important thing is that everything gets counted once. You don't want it to be counted twice. So you want to make sure that everything gets counted and that everything only gets counted once. Once that tag is gone, it's not going to get counted again. So as long as there's a tag, it means it needs to be counted. Once someone takes that tag, turns it in, people walking by this rack with no tag on it, they'll know that this has been counted and they won't count it again. So it does 2 things. Everything gets counted, everything only gets counted once. So that's kind of the beauty of the inventory tags. Okay, let's see. Achieving a proper cutoff of sales and purchases. And I'm just going to go ahead and give you how you do that. Should say and. Okay, so sales and purchases. Cutoff for sales. We use the bill of lading. And we know that from last time, actually. Cutoff for purchases. Use the receiving reports. So sales, we use a bill of lading. Do we actually sell it, send it out the door? And the purchases are what came in. What was the last thing that came in? When we'll go through and see if they have, at the end of the year, whatever, we'll go through and look at the receiving reports, or receiving reports that they have, and those receiving reports should be they should be counted as purchases because it's in the inventory, and it should be the dollar amounts should be there. And there should be an accounts payable if they're paying on an account for it. So bill of lading for the sales, did it actually get shipped out? If it got shipped out, it's not in the inventory. And purchases, receiving report, if we received it, it's in inventory. So receiving reports are very important for those. Questions? Okay, probably not gonna do. I'll talk briefly about the observing the inventory. Okay, so we, as auditors, we do not actually do the inventory. So we don't actually do the inventory. What we'll do is we'll observe it. Now, let me put the tag back up here. So let's say that this is tag number 507. Okay, so here's tag number 507. Before they actually go through and start counting stuff, we'll be walking around and we'll do test counts. In the test count, we would go, okay, test count, we had 3 for tag number 507. Now, when they get, so whoever comes through, goes through and counts these. I'm throwing this one out. Yeah. Let's throw this one out too, because that was fun. No, I'm kidding. All right, so there we go. So this one is so we would then go, okay, here's our test count. We go find the tag. Again, we didn't count it actually for the inventory. Someone else did. They usually an operations person will count it. But we will say, okay, we got number 3, and we'll see if they actually counted 3. And if they did, then it's okay. If they didn't, if they counted 4 or whatever, then we have a problem. And it might lead us to conclude the inventory was not done properly. But so we do a test count. We do not actually, we don't take the tag. We don't do any of the actual counting, that the official counting. We observe it. And we'll do it, and we'll see what kind of condition, are these shirts okay? Are they, can they be sold? Are they, there's something wrong with them? Is, we'll look at the condition of that, see if they, not because the count will be off, the count will still be 3. The reason you look at condition is because there's a value. Okay. We'll go, so some of these we will, so make test counts. This is what you end up spending a lot of time doing, making the test counts. Compliance, yeah, looking at review the cutoff, blah, blah, blah. This is a good one. Observe the control of the inventory tags. This is another thing that we need to do for the inventory tags. So every single every single inventory tag that we have has to be accounted for. Usually these are, I mean, it's almost silly to mention it because it'd be so obvious. They're serially numbered. So they, 1 through 803 or whatever it is. And you have to account for all of them. And if there's one missing, you gotta go find out where it is. So if we're missing tag number 722, we gotta go find where tag 722 is. You probably look where tag 721 is and then start looking around for tag 722. So yeah, but you have to account for all those, and that is again to make sure that everything is counted, make sure all the tags are there, everything is counted. And you don't want to have, I don't know how it would happen, but you don't want to have 2 of these show up. That would be because it's possible that it could happen. Someone thinks that it wasn't covered and they put another tag on it, but anyway. And we already talked about this. This is kind of repetitive what I have here. I'm not sure why. Okay. Seeing a copy of completed physical inventory, clerical accuracy, blah, blah, blah. Number 5 is actually a very important one. And number 6. If you are going to, if someone is going to cook the books for the inventory, doing it by inflating the number of items in that they have, saying, okay, we have, instead of 3, we have 4. That's one that people can catch fairly easy. You just go count it and it's not the same. However, the basis and methods for the inventory, and especially testing the pricing of the inventory, these are ways that you have to, so there's actually 2 things. There's the count and then there's the value. And the value is probably the one that is, well, it's not the most obvious. It's probably the best way if you're going to commit a fraud, that would be the best way to do it. So inventory has 2 aspects. One is the count, and 2 is the value. And again, the count one is one that can be, has a possibility of being caught more readily than the value. Because the value, they may have an invoice or something that shows a certain amount for an item, but what they don't show you is that they get a discount as, for a certain amount or whatever that's not on the invoice. It could be a quantity discount. There's a payment discount. There's also going to be a quantity discount that you don't see. And what that would do is it make your milk look like it's worth a lot more money than it really is. If you order 1,000 gallons of milk, they give you 5% off. That's probably not going to be on the invoice because it'll matter how much milk you buy over the year or whatever. And so a lot of times that will not be on there. Okay. Let's go ahead and take a break. We'll come back.
Professor, could you just show us the paper? What you just make a note?
Which one?
Because we don't see right now any paper. We just see you.
Oh, I'm sorry. I apologize. No, that's not what we wanted. I'm making even more of a mess of this. Okay.
Thank you.
Sorry about that. Yeah, and feel free to interrupt me. You won't offend me. I should have told you this last, pretty much the last class, but yeah. Yeah, so as far as the inventory is concerned, the count is one thing. So this is the physical inventory. But along with that is the value. Now you might check the condition of some of the things that maybe are have a reduced value, when you're doing the physical count of the inventory. But the value of it is actually the one that is probably the easiest way to cook the books. because it's a lot of these contracts are kind of smoke and mirrors, and you don't really know exactly what they're paying for something. And what they have on the invoice might be a higher amount than what they're really paying, which would make your inventory appear to be more valuable than it really is. Okay, let's say be back at be back at 712. Say. And again, we are not having multiple choice for this one, for the 12 and 13. It's all gonna be an essay format. Yep. Okay, we're gonna skip through some of this here. So testing of Florida book, number 10. This is testing for the completeness assertion. What you do is you take something off the floor and make sure that it's included in the books on the general ledger. So you're at Walmart, excuse me, you go take a TV, well, you don't take the TV, but you take a picture of the TV, their, the SKU number and that, and you go and check and see that they have it on their books. So this is for the completeness assertion. They have, is it complete? Is their inventory on their books complete? Book to floor. This is testing for existence. And this is to say, okay, they have this on their books. Does it really exist? Do they really have this, or are they just making this number up? So you'll take perhaps a TV from their books and see if it is on the floor. Find it. I when I was doing inventory, huh? Uh, tank. When I was at Navistar, we made diesel engines for Ford. All the Ford trucks had our engines in it. But when I was looking through the inventory of the engines, I saw, and most of the, back then anyway, the truck engines were all worth about $3,000, $4,000. Anyway, I came across this engine that was $28,000. And so I was like, wow, I want to go see a $28,000 engine. This is back when cars cost, like 15,000 or something. So I was like, okay, I want to go see this engine. So I was looking around, and we couldn't find it. We couldn't find it. We found out later that it was a test engine for the research and development department, and that it was it didn't look anything special. It just had all this stuff on it, but all the costs they put into it, it came out to $28,000. But it actually was not for sale. It was actually part of their research and development. Okay,
But that's still.
I'm sorry.
That's still becomes.
Yeah, and two, while it was an inventory item but actually it would be included in the property, plant, and equipment because it was actually not for sale. Inventory by definition is for sale. And so, yeah, it was a reclassification, even though it was originally, it's what they call a mule engine. A mule engine is the one that they take and they put it to perfect specifications, and then they see how long it'll run under ideal circumstances. So they ran this thing for, I don't know, months. And anyway, that was part of their research stuff. So it really wasn't for sale. It was and they don't sell them. They destroy them afterwards. Okay. One thing sometimes you check on those, see if they have inventory pledged for collateral. This is one of those weird things that's not always obvious. Sometimes you look for like bank statements and stuff that they may have the inventory. And sometimes the bank statement will say you have to get permission to, or the bank agreement will say that they have to get permission to sell it because they don't want people selling the collateral out from underneath the loan. They say if you sell it, you give us the money. Okay, so that's pretty much inventory. And inventory is really big. Retailers, inventory is almost everything. You know, if you talk to people from Walmart, they don't care about much else except inventory. Okay. So property, plant, and equipment. This is long-term stuff. They're long-term assets, and these are not for sale. Okay, so it's sort of like this. If we had for instance, let's say you go into Walmart and you'll see they have shelves, you know, and on those shelves they have boxes of cereal. Okay, so they have cereal on the back, you know, so these shelves, these are property, plant, and equipment. Okay, equipment. So we have these shelves, you know, that are property, plant, and equipment. All the cereal that's on these, this will be inventory. We're selling it. No, so we're selling the cereal, we're not selling the shelves. But now we're still going to take an inventory of the property, plant, and equipment. To see, you know, they have these shelves, okay. Now, which is going to take longer? So you have this shelf and it goes, you know, open, it's got hundreds of boxes of cereal on it. Which one's going to take longer to audit, the shelves or the inventory? You got one shelf, you have hundreds of boxes of cereal. Yeah, the inventory is going to take a lot longer. So, you know, if you have shelves, if you have property, plant, and equipment, usually it takes much less time. You know, this, for instance, this building we're in, this is a property, plant, and equipment. You know, every year, I'm sure the auditors come and say, is the building still there? Oh, there's the building. Okay, you know, so it's much, takes usually much less time, especially dollar wise. You know, this building is much easier to count millions, however many millions of dollars goes into the building. It's much easier to count than the, say the inventory in the bookstore, which probably takes days to count. So the time spent on property, plant, and equipment versus current assets, things like inventory. Property, plant, and equipment is usually It takes much less time to audit. Than inventory. Because it, and not only is it much bigger usually, the shelf is worth more than this one shelf is worth however many thousands of dollars, and it's worth, quite a bit, dollar wise. So dollar wise, you can count more property, plant, and equipment quicker, but also doesn't change from one year to the next. This shelf's going to be here next year, and the year after that, and the year after that, and the year after that. It doesn't move. Inventory comes in and goes out. The cereal comes in, goes out, comes in, goes out, comes in, goes out. This doesn't move. So it's usually much easier to track property, plant, and equipment than it is inventory. Okay. So, by the way, I'm just going to start calling this PP&E just to save time. This is usually what you see it anyways. So property, plant, and equipment usually takes much less time to audit than inventory. The initial audits, when you first start with an audit client, usually you require a complete property, plant, and equipment audit. So the first audit, you require a complete count. Repeat engagements. Usually there's a 3 to 5 year cycle for counting property, plant, and equipment. E3. I'm going to do it in numbers. So we do not count it every year. Now inventory you count every year. Property, plant, and equipment, usually there's a 3 to 5 year cycle. Because it doesn't move around that much usually. If something strange happened, maybe you would count it more often, but generally speaking, it's a 3 to 5 year cycle. So the first audit, we count everything. After that, 3 to 5 year cycle usually. Okay, so substantive tests. So changes property, plant, and equipment in reconcile in the shelter. So what you're really looking for here are additions and retirements. And those are usually will tell you what's on the you just update from the previous year. So you're looking for two things generally, additions and retirements. Now, additions usually have they have a lot of paperwork. They have well, let me break this off. Let me put this separately. They have purchase orders. Have receiving reports. They have invoices. They may have test runs. There's usually a lot of paperwork when it comes to additions. There'll be approvals and all kinds of stuff. Retirements are much more susceptible to problems because there is no fanfare for retirement. Sometimes they just push it out back and the garbage guy comes and takes it. Which was paperwork, if any. And the problem with that is you may have items on the books that are no longer there. Well, I can make this any color I want. Hey, let's make it that color. Well, that's almost invisible. Let's not make it that color. Okay. So for this reason, a lot of times you'll have, if this shelf gets thrown out, let's say they get new shelving in, this shelf gets thrown out. Sometimes they'll just push it out back. We're getting rid of that old shelf. Okay, push it out in the alley and, the garbage people come pick it up. So the problem is you need to take that off the books. So one of the problems is that oftentimes retirements do not get the same attention that additions do. Additions, there's all kinds of paperwork, they get invoices, they get payments, they put on, they have to put tags on it and all this kind of stuff. Whereas retirements a lot of times are overlooked. So finding retirements is sometimes a more involved job than finding additions because there is such amounts. What do you do how do you find them? You look for really old equipment. Look for really old equipment, see if it's still there. Or if they got a new piece of equipment in, oh, we got the new shelving in. Okay, well, let's see what happened to the old shelving. That sort of thing. So there are ways to look to see if you can, to try to identify those things that are retired that don't show up on the books. But it tends to be more of a problem because they don't have any paperwork. They may not have any paperwork. Okay, physical inspection of acquisition and plant and equipment. That's, anything that's new, you go to check and see if they actually have it. This is one that's very interesting. Analyze repair and maintenance accounts. And you may say, why? Good question. Normal maintenance is expensed, but if it's major, major expenses are, let me put this on here. So normal maintenance is expensed. So you get, for instance, you have a truck, you get the oil changed, it's expensed. You buy new tires for it, it's expensive. You get the brakes done, it's expensed. If they are major repairs, or upgrades, they may need to be capitalized. They come in two categories. The two categories are if they extend the life. of the asset. Um, Goes from 5 years to 10 years. That would be something you'd capitalize. You would not expense it. So let's say you get the engine overhauled or something, and now you're going to have it last for 10 years more instead of 5. Okay, second one would be increase of the capacity. So you get a major upgrade to it, and now instead of it makes reduces production by say 30%. So now instead of making 1,000 items a day, it makes 1,300 items a day. So these two will be capitalized. They'll be put on the books as new equipment. So you have to go through sometimes the maintenance and expense accounts to see if there's any of these major upgrades or repairs that will extend the life or extend the capacity of it. So this is two. I do want to talk about one thing here. Okay. This is another big issue. Evaluate and test the accounting for impairments of property, plant, and equipment. This is if property, plant, and equipment is impaired, it needs to be written down. There's all kinds of rules to this, by the way. Generally to the current value. So impaired property, plant, and equipment should be written down to the current value. There are different methods for doing the international standards has a different method than the US standard. But the impairment is actually written down the same. Okay, let me see what else we have here. We're not going to release any of this. Okay, let's definitely jump to the end here. Property, plant, and equipment not currently used is not property, plant, and equipment. It has to be used to be property, plant, and equipment. Property, plant, and equipment is by definition those long-term assets that are being used. So property, plant, and equipment not being used. What do we do with that? Land not used is usually, yep. Land not used is usually an investment. Plant and equipment not used is usually other assets. There's not too many things in other assets, but probably going, and by the way, this can also go for new equipment. If you have a new piece of equipment that you haven't started using yet, it does not go in property, plant, and equipment. So you buy a new machine, you go, okay, we're not gonna start using that until next year. That is not property, plant, and equipment. That's gonna be in other assets until you start using it. Then it goes in property, plant, and equipment, and then it starts getting depreciated. But until you start using it, it's gonna be in other assets. That is it for this class.
Would that be considered as other assets or inventory?
It could be like, and especially if it's not for sale.
Mhm.
Yeah, it could be. I, my brother runs a music store, and they always have like some outrageously expensive guitar that everyone comes in and looks at. No one buys it
Yeah.
because it's like it's a $10,000 guitar. So it's technically for sale, but they really don't even care if they sell it because it's more of a draw than anything else. People go and look at the $10,000 guitar. But yeah, certainly though, if they had a showpiece that wasn't for sale, it would absolutely be in. Well, actually that might be for advertising. That might be a kind of like a sign. The more I think about it, I will tell you, I don't have it on here. Actually, I do. It's right here. This is a big one. I'm sorry. I lied to you when I said we were done. Leasehold improvements. This is a big one now. And this is like in the last few years, this has really become big. Leasehold improvements. What are those? Those are when you lease something and you make an improvement to it. You don't actually own it. For instance, you go to a mall and you see a McDonald's and they have all this stuff, it has McDonald's signs and all that stuff. Actually, legally, McDonald's doesn't own those. So for instance, here's a building. I'm telling you because it's probably not gonna look like a building, but so we get this building that we're leasing this building. A lease on this building. And we have a sign on it that says eat here. So here's a sign. So we rent the building and we attach the sign to it. This is called an attachment. We don't actually own it. It's one of the weird things. It's actually an intangible, technically, because we don't own it. We get the benefit of the sign, but we actually don't own the sign. Whoever owns the building owns the sign. For a good reason. If someone leaves, they can't say, well, you can't take our sign down. No, whoever owns the building owns the sign, and if you leave, they're taking the sign down because it's their building. So this is an attachment, but this is called a leasehold improvement. And it's a little bit strange because this is usually, these are usually included in property, plant, and equipment. So leasehold improvement is actually an intangible. We don't own the sign, we get the benefit of it. But it's actually, they usually show this in property, plant, and equipment. Now, these can be huge dollars. You look at something like a Cracker Barrel or something like that, they come in, they change everything, they put all their stuff up, they do, all this mounting so it all looks the same, and they redo the outside and everything else. These can be huge dollar amounts, like billions. And the problem is, let's say that you have this lease for 5 years, and the sign is going to last for 20 years. What's the problem? The problem is they don't renew the lease with you. So even though the sign's going to last for 20 years, they don't renew the lease with you. So this sign can probably be written off over 5-year lease, unless they have a ironclad, you can renew it for the next 20 years. You have, and so they had, and for years they went along with however long you think you're going to renew it. Well, a lot of these places, the real estate became so volatile and so expensive and all that kind of stuff that many times they weren't renewing these leases. So you had this huge, about maybe 5 or 6 years ago, you had this huge amount of these chain places that had billions of dollars in this stuff. They had to write them all up. because they couldn't get the leases renewed. They say, well, no, we don't want this to be a Burger King anymore. We're gonna put up a whatever. So, yeah, so the leasehold improvements are a big thing that you have to look into, that you written down, and again, they are attached to the lease. So the lease itself will determine how much of this leasehold improvement you have to write off. And if they don't have it, again, if it's not in the lease, how long they can keep the place for, it's usually the length of the lease that we write it off for. So usually leasehold improvements are limited. Now, if they have, if they have wording in there that says that they can renew the lease, if whoever's leasing it can renew it, that's different. But it has to be on the lease itself. It has to be a signed document, or it goes by the length of the lease, which may be much shorter than the life of the asset. Okay, now we're done. Promise. All right. Any questions? And this one will just be on. This will be just a essay question. I think there's 5 of them. Any questions? Okay, so the next thing that's going to happen is I am going to, those of you, the Zoom people, I will be sending out the exams probably in the next 15, 20 minutes. And I'll send out both of these to you guys. Those of you in the classroom, I'll give you copies of them, but I'm also going to send them to you. And you can turn in. Now, as far as turning in these exams, you can turn them in class, in person, if you guys want. At home too, you can, if you want to come in, you can turn them in that way, or put them into Blackboard, either one. Which is good. No, I am going to check in the practice exam though for you guys, and then then I'll send it out. Okay, so any questions? Okay, so
Sir,
any questions?
no, sir, we're all good.
Okay. All right, right answer. All right, so I will send you guys out the chapters 12 and 13 exam and the sampling exam. It's due by Friday of the 13th. If you're gonna have if you're having trouble getting stuff in, let me know. It's possible that we can make arrangements. The grades do have to go in, though. I can't hold up. All the grades have to go in mass. When I fill out the grade sheet, if I leave one blank, it says, "Hey, knucklehead, you forgot to put a grade in." It doesn't use those terms, but that's kind of what it's saying. But so anyway, so they all have to go in at once. So, but anyway, we can make arrangements though if you need more time or something to do anything. Just let me know and you put in. And sometimes what we can do is if you do have a passing grade, which in this class is a B, sometimes it's easier just to put in the B and then put in the grade change when you get it, when you turn in the stuff. The reason I say that is, especially if you need the class for things like sitting for the CPA exam or something like that, it's better to have a grade in there. If I put in an incomplete, that shows up as nothing. It shows up as not passing the class. So sometimes a grade, and then putting in the changing the grade is a better option because it at least will open the door that you can take other things, or if you're going to sit for the CPA exam. Okay. Any questions?
Hello, Professor. My chapter 10 exam is still pending. I don't know why.
What happened?
Chapter 10 exam is still pending. Like it's showing that it's not yet checked in.
I will, let me write a note to myself. I will look into it and
Okay.
and I'll let you know.
Okay.
And you turned it in, right? I assume.
Yeah.
You did turn it in. I'm looking right at it. Yes, I will put it in.
Okay.
Any other questions? Certainly if I haven't got your test in yet. Now, some people have already turned in the chapter 11 test, and I usually grade those all at once just because it makes the grading more consistent, to be honest with you. Not enough people have turned it in to really get a feel for how the grading should go on it. And the reason I say that is if someone misses one of the questions, if everyone misses that one question, it's probably the way I taught it rather than any shortcomings of the students. So, yeah, let me, so yeah, other than the chapter 11 exam, they should all be in if you turned them in.
Chapter 11, sampling overview, and the handout for account receivables. I've turned in, I've checked it in, but it's not yet showing yet.
The exam?
Yeah, no, not the exam, the handout.
Oh,
Chapter 11, yeah. Sampling overview, chapter 11 and inventory, PP, they are still pending on.
okay. I'll take a look. So the chapter 11 handout then?
Yes.
Okay. I'll check on that.
Okay.
Sorry about that. Anyone else? Anything else? Feel free to email me too, because if if there's something I'm missing, I certainly want to put it in. And certainly if I'm missing exam, that's a big one. Okay. All right. Well, I'll see you guys, and I will. You'll be getting the exam shortly.
Thank you, Professor. Good night.
Thanks. Yeah.
Have a good night, everybody.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night.